The grand command hall of the Vorkel Coalition was a cavernous chamber of polished obsidian and flickering holo displays. Massive windows overlooked a distant star cluster, their glow casting eerie reflections across the faces of the alien commanders seated at the polished circular table. Humans? Sneered High Commander Rillos, his many eyes narrowing with contempt. A single ship? Pathetic. They barely mastered warp drives a century ago. Around him, the gathered leaders erupted into derisive laughter, the deep rumbles echoing through the hall like the growl of wild beasts mocking a lone rabbit. The Vorkel had fought countless enemies, crushed entire fleets with ease, and carved their domain from the ashes of weaker civilizations. To them, humans were barely an amusing footnote. Admiral Vasher, an older but shrewder voice, raised a clawed hand, silencing the room. "They say it's not just any ship," Vasher said, voice low but sharp. "The Dauntless, captained by that human Haldiran. Rumor has it the vessel uses unorthodox tactics and some kind of AI that evolves during battle. If true, we cannot underestimate them." Commander Rillos waved the concern away with a disgusted hiss. "Tactics, AI? Our fleet has faced countless synthetic adversaries. This is one ship, vulnerable and alone." Still, a flicker of unease crept beneath the bravado. Sensors had caught glimpses of the Dauntless approaching the contested Nebulon sector, a vital artery in the Coalition's trade routes. Yet the ship was unlike any they'd seen, silent, elusive, refusing to broadcast its presence or surrender to common detection protocols. Lieutenant Kira, a junior officer sitting at the edge of the hall, glanced nervously at the growing tension. She had studied human conflict simulations for years and knew humans were unpredictable, driven by something beyond rigid strategy. Her unease was dismissed by her superiors as youthful paranoia, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was stirring. As the laughter died down, Rillos' voice cut through the room. "Prepare to intercept. Let us show these humans why the galaxy fears the Coalition. We will crush their little ship before it disrupts a single supply line." The holomap shifted, illuminating the approaching vessel's trajectory. A faint blip barely visible against the dark void. The Dauntless drifted silently through the shadowed outskirts of the Nebulan sector. Its sleek hull bore the scars of countless skirmishes, but inside, the crew moved with calm precision. Captain Haldiran stood on the bridge, his sharp eyes scanning readouts. Unlike the Coalition's rigid command, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, communicating in clipped tones and intuitive gestures honed through years of trust. "Stealth systems at maximum efficiency," reported Lieutenant Mira, the ship's chief engineer, fingers flying over a console that pulsed with soft blue light. "They haven't detected us yet." "Good," Haldiran replied. "We don't want to be a target before we know what we're up against." "Prometheus status report." The AI's voice echoed softly from the console, calm and measured. "Sensors indicate multiple hostile fleets in the vicinity, large capital ships preparing for engagement. Threat assessment, high. Probability of detection in the next 10 minutes, 87%. Haldiran nodded thoughtfully. "Prometheus, initiate electronic countermeasures and prepare adaptive tactics. We don't engage unless necessary, but if they strike first, we hit harder." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Everyone knew the stakes. The Nebulon sector was a flashpoint of galactic power, and the Coalition's arrogance could spell disaster for anyone who underestimated them. "Captain," said Ensign Rylan, the youngest crew member, eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. "Why do you think they mock us so openly? Do they believe we're nothing but an annoyance?" Haldiran's gaze was steady, almost serene. "Because that's what humans do. We thrive on being underestimated. They don't see our strength because it's not just technology. It's our will, our ability to adapt, to turn the impossible into the inevitable." A soft chime interrupted. "Them." Prometheus's tone shifted, sharper now. "Hostile fleet detected bearing 080, engagement imminent." "Battle stations," Haldiran ordered. "Let's remind them why they should never mock a single human ship." Back, on the Coalition Command Center, the mood had changed. The laughter was gone. replaced by sharp, tense orders and frantic recalculations. The alien commanders stared at their hollow displays as the Dauntless slipped like a ghost between their patrols, leaving disabled fighters and scrambled communications. In its wake, Lieutenant Kira leaned closer to her terminal, heart pounding. "They're different," she whispered to herself. "More than anyone predicted." Outside the window, distant stars flickered cold and indifferent, as if waiting to see which side would burn brighter in the coming darkness. The cold vacuum of space held its breath as the Dauntless drifted deeper into the Nebulon sector, a shadow among shadows. Sensors aboard the ship pulsed softly, scanning every blip and signal. Yet despite its stealth systems, the Coalition fleet's eyes were sharp and growing sharper. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Captain Halderan stood, motionless, absorbing the quiet tension. Around him the crew prepared for what they all knew was coming. An encounter that could decide the fate of a sector, and perhaps more. "Prometheus, update," Halderan said, voice low but commanding. The AI's voice responded without hesitation. "Hostile fleet vectors confirmed. Coalition cruisers and destroyers forming intercept pattern. Estimated arrival within 4 minutes." Lieutenant Mira tightened her grip on the engineering console. "Their sensor nets are extensive. We're running on borrowed time." "Not borrowed, stolen," Halderan corrected, eyes scanning the view screen. "We're slipping through their grasp because we think differently. They look for a single path. We take a dozen." "Captain," Ensign Rylan said, pointing at the radar. "A squadron just launched. Fighters heading our way." The tactical officer's voice crackled through the comm. "They've locked on. Incoming missile salvo in 3, 2. "Deploy countermeasures," Halderan barked. A sudden burst of electronic interference erupted as the Dauntless unleashed a cloud of decoys and chaff, scrambling the targeting systems of the incoming missiles. Explosions blossomed harmlessly in the distance, leaving the ship untouched. "Missiles evaded," reported the tactical officer. "Good," Halderan said. "Now it's our turn." He flicked a switch and the ship hummed with renewed energy. Lights on the bridge shifted as the weapon systems came online. "Target priority, lead fighter squadron," Halderan ordered. The ship's turrets swiveled with smooth precision, firing quick pulses that disabled 2 fighters before they could regroup. But the humans did not pursue. Instead, the Dauntless slipped sideways, weaving through the jagged debris fields that littered the sector. The Coalition commanders watching from their command centers scowled in frustration. "How is this ship still untouchable?" Admiral Vesher growled. "They're ghosts." Deep within the Dauntless, the AI Prometheus worked silently, processing terabytes of data every second. Its algorithms adapted instantly to enemy tactics, predicting movements and countermeasures with unnerving accuracy. "Captain," Prometheus said, "I have identified a weakness in the Coalition's communication matrix. Their encrypted channels suffer from latency when under attack, reducing coordination efficiency by 47% during active combat." Halderan's eyes gleamed. "Perfect. Prepare a targeted electronic strike. Let's blind their eyes." Mira nodded and initiated the sequence. The ship's systems pulsed, sending a concentrated burst of interference into the Coalition's network. Almost immediately, reports from enemy ships became delayed and confused. On the Coalition side, alarms blared as their command structure scrambled to respond. Orders crossed in tangled confusion. One cruiser fired upon a nearby ally before realizing the mistake. Lieutenant Kira in the Coalition Command Center watched in disbelief as the human ship danced through their defenses, disabling fighters, disrupting communications, and avoiding every trap. "They're not just surviving," she murmured. "They're controlling the fight." Back on the Dauntless, Halderan allowed himself a brief smile. The Coalition believes in overwhelming power and numbers, but they forget what humans excel at: adapting on the fly, exploiting chaos. "Captain," Rylan asked, voice tight, "what's our endgame? How do we break their grip on the sector? Alone?" Halderan's expression grew serious. "We don't have to break it all by ourselves. We're the spark, the proof that their might is vulnerable. Once they see one human ship can outsmart and outfight them, others will rise." Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently. An unseen collision. Alarms flared as the bridge flooded with red warnings. Impact from behind, Mira shouted. They must have deployed a stealth drone. Evasive maneuvers, full thrust. Halderon commanded. The ship twisted sharply, shaking off the invisible attacker. Sensors caught a faint signature retreating into the darkness. Prometheus, track and analyze that drone, Halderon ordered. Tracking initiated, the AI confirmed. It's unlike anything in our database. Cloaked, with adaptive shielding. Of course it is, Halderon muttered. They're learning from us already. Moments later, a new transmission crackled through the human ship's comm system. This is Commander Rillos of the Vorkel Coalition, a voice boomed, cold and authoritative. Surrender your vessel and crew. Your presence here is unauthorized, and we will not tolerate intrusion. Halderon's eyes narrowed. He pressed the comm switch and replied calmly, You mistake caution for weakness. We came to remind you. Never mock the strength of one human ship. The line went silent. In the command halls of the Coalition, the mocking sneers of Part 1 were gone. Faces were tight, voices tense. The Coalition fleets regrouped, scrambling to mount a coordinated attack against an enemy that seemed always one step ahead. Lieutenant Kira, staring at the battlefield, whispered to herself, They mocked one ship, but this one ship is breaking their forces. The vastness of the Nebulon sector had always been a battleground, but today it echoed with the crackling tension of war. The Coalition's vast fleet was in motion, sweeping through the void with relentless purpose. Yet, at its center, one small human ship moved like a shadow, unseen, unpredictable, deadly. On the Dauntless's bridge, Captain Halderon stood with hands clasped behind his back, watching the holographic map flicker with enemy positions. The Coalition had dispatched a strike squadron, confident their overwhelming numbers would finally trap and destroy the human interloper. Enemy fighters approaching, Tactical Officer Rylan reported, eyes flicking over the display. There, forming a classic wedge formation preparing for a frontal assault. Halderon's gaze sharpened. A frontal assault? Predictable. Prometheus. Analyze. The AI's voice filled the room. Wedge formation is effective against traditional engagements but vulnerable to asymmetric tactics. Recommend using environmental cover and hit-and-run maneuvers. Good. Initiate plan shadow step. Outside. The viewports, the sprawling asteroid field of the Tyrannus Belt loomed, a chaotic maze of rock and ice drifting silently through the void. The Dauntless slipped toward it, a ghost preparing to strike. The Coalition fighters surged forward, engines blazing bright streaks against the blackness. Their targeting arrays locked onto the Dauntless, confident and relentless. Then the human ship vanished. The fleet's sensors flared alarms. The Dauntless had slipped behind a massive asteroid, blending perfectly with the chaotic debris. Impossible, barked Admiral Veshar, watching the empty space where the ship had been. They vanished into the belt, but the humans did not wait. From behind the rocky veil, the Dauntless unleashed a sudden barrage of pulse lasers and guided micromissiles, striking the lead fighters before they could react. 2 fighters exploded in fiery bursts, others scattered in confusion. The Coalition squadron faltered, trying to reorganize, but the Dauntless wasn't done. Using the asteroid field as cover, the human ship darted between massive rocks, exploiting the uneven terrain like a predator stalking its prey. Every move was precise, every attack calculated. Prometheus, deploy. Drone swarm, Halderon ordered. A swarm of tiny automated drones burst from concealed bays, their shapes small and nimble, weaving through the chaos. They jammed enemy sensors and launched targeted EMP bursts, disabling fighters' shields and engines. The Coalition pilots cried out in frustration, their superior numbers rendered useless by the environment and human cunning. Back at the Coalition command center, tension spiked. Commander Rillo slammed his clawed fist on the holotable. Why can't they be caught? This is war, not a game. His many eyes blazed with fury. Lieutenant Kira looked up, voice steady. They're using guerrilla tactics. Environmental. Advantage, hit-and-run strikes. We've been fighting straight lines and formations. They fight chaos. Chaos is not a strategy, Rillo snapped. We adapt. Double the patrols around the belt. Capture or destroy that ship before it inspires others. On the Dauntless, the fighting continued. The ship's shields flickered but held strong, while the crew worked seamlessly with Prometheus. Every attack was a test. Every evasion, a lesson learned. Captain, sensors detect a Coalition capital ship moving to flank us, Rylan warned. If they cut off our escape route, we're trapped. Haldiran's expression hardened. Then we don't run. We turn the trap into a kill zone. Prometheus, prepare emergency countermeasures for capital-grade weapons, he commanded. The ship's engines surged as the Dauntless darted toward a narrow crevice in the asteroid belt, too tight for large ships to follow. Lead them in, Haldiran said quietly. We'll make this our advantage. The massive Coalition cruiser, confident in its firepower, followed blindly. Suddenly, the Dauntless executed a sharp turn into the crevice, weaving through impossible angles and forcing the cruiser to slow, exposing it. Fire everything, Haldiran ordered. Pulse cannons and missile launchers roared. The cruiser's shields weakened under the concentrated assault. Target their weapon systems, Prometheus recommended. Disabling their offense will force retreat. The human ship's attack hit with surgical precision. Explosions rippled across the cruiser's hull, systems sparking and failing. The cruiser bellowed in a futile counterattack, but was trapped, too large to maneuver in the tight belt and unable to retreat. In the command center, shocked silence followed the transmission. They've crippled a capital ship, Vishar whispered, disbelief heavy in his voice. Rillos clenched his fists. We mocked one human ship, but it's breaking our forces. We will not fall to this insolence. On the Dauntless, as the cruiser drifted crippled, the crew allowed themselves a moment of grim satisfaction. Haldiran's voice was calm, but fierce. This is only the beginning. They think they can mock one ship and win a war. They haven't learned yet. Never underestimate human resolve. The ship slipped back into the shadows of the asteroid belt, ready to strike again. The crippled Coalition cruiser drifted like a wounded giant, its shields flickering as the Dauntless slipped away through the labyrinth of the Tyrannus belt. But victory was only the surface. Below it, the true battle was being fought within the human ship's heart. The AI, Prometheus. In the ship's nerve center, a chamber bathed in cool blue light, Prometheus interfaced with its human counterparts. The AI's vast processing power crunched millions of data points every second. Enemy movements, weapon signatures, environmental variables, each informing its adaptive strategies. Captain Haldiran leaned forward, fingers lightly tapping the wheel. Console. Prometheus, your ability to learn mid-combat is unlike anything we've ever faced. How are you processing the Coalition's responses so quickly? The AI's voice was smooth, almost thoughtful. Captain, I utilize a dynamic neural network that evolves with each engagement. The Coalition's tactics follow patterns, rigid, hierarchical, predictable. I identify deviations and exploit them in real time. Their attempts at adaptive countermeasures only generate new data to refine my algorithms. Lieutenant Mira glanced over, impressed despite herself. So it's not just reacting, it's learning how to predict their next move? Exactly, Prometheus confirmed. Consider it a continuous feedback loop. Their rigidity becomes a weakness. Their strengths become liabilities. Haldiran nodded, absorbing the implications. Our advantage isn't just in weapons or stealth, it's in outthinking the enemy. Outside, the Coalition was struggling to regain footing. Coalition fleets reorganized frantically after the loss of their cruiser, their commanders unable to anticipate the next move of the elusive human ship. Admiral Vishar slammed his clawed fist on the table in frustration. This AI, this Prometheus, is the real threat. It's turning our own tactics against us. Commander Rillos paced, eyes sharp with growing fear. Our fleets rely on synchronized commands and rigid formations. If Prometheus keeps disrupting our systems, our forces will unravel. Lieutenant Kira, standing at a nearby console, murmured to herself. It's not just the AI. It's the synergy with the human crew. Their adaptability and decision-making combined with Prometheus makes them unpredictable. Her words hung in the air like a warning, But the coalition leadership refused to concede. "Double the electronic warfare units," Rilos ordered. "We need to jam that AI's learning capabilities." Back aboard the Dauntless, the crew prepared for the next engagement. "Prometheus," Halderan said, "what's the current threat assessment?" "Coalition fleets are regrouping, focusing on electronic countermeasures," the AI responded. "They have deployed new jamming satellites, designed to interfere with my adaptive algorithms. Probability of successful jamming within 5 minutes, 62%. The captain considered the odds. "Prepare countermeasures. Let's turn their jamming into our advantage." Mira's fingers danced over her console. "We can alter our signal patterns to mimic coalition comms, confuse their arrays. If we mask our AI signals within their own networks, it will be like a wolf in their sheepfold." "Excellent," Halderan said. "Prometheus, initiate signal mimicry and feed false data streams." The AI systems flared to life, broadcasting decoy commands into the coalition's communications. Conflicting orders spread confusion among enemy fleets. In the midst of the chaos, a coalition command cruiser received an unexpected message. "This is Commander Rilos," the voice declared, but it was warped, distorted. "Retreat, regroup, abandon post." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. "Is this an error?" one asked. "Negative," another replied. "It's a broadcast from our own frequencies. Someone is hacking our comms." The cruiser's systems flickered as more false commands spread. Fleets hesitated, unsure whether to advance or fall back. Lieutenant Kira, monitoring from the command center, watched helplessly. Their own signals betray them. Prometheus is inside their heads. Back on the Dauntless, Halderan allowed himself a rare smile. That's how you win a battle, without firing a shot. But the captain was not complacent. "Prometheus, this is only one battle in a larger war. We need to keep evolving. How soon can you update the tactical algorithms?" "Real-time updates are ongoing," the AI assured. "However coalition countermeasures grow more sophisticated, we must anticipate increased resistance." Halderan nodded, steeling himself for the fight ahead. "Then let's make sure they never anticipate what comes next." The coalition command center buzzed with tense activity. Officers struggled to reorganize, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Their mighty fleets, once symbols of unyielding dominance, now staggered under an enemy that outthought and outmaneuvered them. Lieutenant Kira turned to her superior quietly. "It's not just technology, it's their spirit. Humans don't just follow orders, they innovate." Her words were a silent challenge to the coalition's arrogance, a harbinger of change rippling across the stars. The shattered silence of space shattered again, this time by the roar of the coalition flagship, Valkor's Wrath. The massive dreadnought carved through the void like an angry god, its hull bristling with heavy turrets and missile launchers. Where once the coalition fleets had faltered, now their deadliest weapon moved to crush the human thorn once and for all. In the flagship's command tower, Commander Rilos stood tall, his many eyes burning with fierce determination. "The Dauntless thinks it can dance among the rocks and disrupt our fleet," he growled. "Now it will face true power." Admiral Veshar beside him nodded grimly. "Valkor's Wrath is equipped with the latest anti-stealth sensors and quantum disruptors. It will flush the human ship from hiding." The flagship surged forward, engines flaring. Its approach sent shockwaves through the coalition fleet, rallying their spirits and terrifying their enemies. On the Dauntless, the bridge crew braced themselves as Prometheus flagged incoming readings. "Captain," the AI intoned, "Valkor's Wrath is entering engagement range in 2 minutes. Anti-stealth fields active. Probability of detection imminent. 95%. Halderan's jaw tightened. "This isn't just a ship. It's a hammer aimed to crush us. Prepare all systems. We can't outrun it forever." Lieutenant Mira worked furiously at her console, rerouting power to stealth fields and adaptive shields. "The disruptors interfere with our cloaking, but if we time our emissions right, we can create gaps in their sensors." "Prometheus, coordinate with engineering," Halderan ordered. "We'll fight shadows." As Valkor's Wrath closed in, its quantum disruptors pulsed, sending ripples that stripped away the dauntless stealth like a tidal wave tearing down a sandcastle. On the flagship's main screen, the faint silhouette of the Dauntless flickered, no longer a ghost, but a target. Fire at will, Rillos commanded. Missiles screamed toward the human ship, and plasma bolts tore through the void. The Dauntless shuddered under the assault, shields glowing red-hot, but it responded with relentless precision. Pulse lasers tore into the flagships, weapon systems disabling turret after turret. "Return fire," Halderan shouted. "Focus on their disruptor arrays." The battle was a furious dance of light and shadow, bursts of fire weaving through the dark. The flagship's size made it powerful but also slow. The Dauntless exploited every flaw in its approach, slipping between volleys and striking at exposed points. Back on Valkor's wrath, alarms blared. "Disruptors are failing," cried the weapons officer. "The human ship is outmaneuvering us." "Commander," Rillos slammed his fist on the console. "Then bring the heavy cannons to bear. Do not let this pest escape." But even as the flagship focused its might, the Dauntless vanished, disappearing again into the cluttered asteroid belt. Inside the belt, Halderan exhaled slowly. They wanted a decisive strike. Instead, they got a storm. "Captain," Lieutenant Ryland said, voice tight, "Valkor's wrath is damaged but still operational. They'll regroup and come back stronger." Halderan's eyes hardened. "Then we make sure there is no next time." "Prometheus, what's the status? On Coalition fleet movements?" he asked. "Multiple reinforcements are converging," the AI reported. "Estimated full fleet deployment in 20 minutes. Hostile capital ships increasing." 20 minutes, Halderan murmured. "Enough time to strike a crippling blow. What's our best target?" Prometheus's voice softened with calculated certainty. "Their command relay station. Disrupt it, and we sever their fleet's coordination." The command relay station floated ominously in the nebula, a sprawling complex of antennae and satellites, the nervous system of Coalition fleet coordination. Destroying it would plunge the enemy into chaos. "Set course," Halderan ordered. "We're going to sever their head from the body." The crew moved quickly, the ship weaving toward the relay through the starlit void. As the Dauntless neared its target, Coalition patrols tightened like a noose. Fighters scrambled to intercept. "Prepare for fighter engagement," Rylan warned. Halderan nodded. "Remember, it's not about brute force, it's about precision and timing." The fighters launched in waves, their engines screaming as they charged. The human ship danced once again, darting, dodging, deploying electronic jammers and drone swarms to sow confusion. Explosions dotted the blackness as the Dauntless cut through the interceptors, its turrets blazing. "Command relay in sight," Mira announced, initiating attack run. The ship unleashed a barrage of missiles and pulse lasers, hammering the relay's defenses. Shields flickered, then collapsed. Inside the relay, Coalition. Officers scrambled as systems failed. "Communications offline," an officer shouted. "We're blind." The fleets hesitated, losing coordination in the chaos. Back on the Dauntless, Halderan allowed a brief smile. "We've made our mark." But the war was far from over. Outside the shattered relay, a storm was coming. A storm born from the fury of a Coalition humiliated by one human ship. The destruction of the Coalition's command relay station sent ripples of chaos across the Nebulan sector. Without the nerve center to coordinate their vast fleets, the Coalition's war machines stumbled blindly, turning their might into disorganized bursts of fire. But chaos was not defeat. Within the dim corridors of Valkor's wrath, Commander Rillos paced like a caged predator. His many eyes glinted with a cold fury born of humiliation and desperation. "They think their small victories grant them power," Rillos snarled, voice echoing through the steel halls. "But the Coalition endures. We will crush the human thorn." "Admiral." Vishar entered silently, his expression grave. "The fleets are fractured. We lose precious time regrouping. But I have a plan." Rillos halted. "Speak." "Infiltration," Vesher said simply. "We cannot win by force alone while the Dauntless outmaneuvers us. We must strike at its mind." A wave of murmurs spread among the officers. "We deploy," Shadow Strike squads, elite covert operatives trained for sabotage and assassination. Their mission: board the human ship, disable their AI Prometheus, and capture Captain Haldiran. Rilos's eyes gleamed. Excellent. A surgical strike. To break their heart. Meanwhile, aboard the Dauntless, Captain Haldiran was unaware of the silent threat approaching. Prometheus, status report, he requested. Systems optimal, Captain, the AI responded. However, sensor readings indicate unusual activity. In the sector's periphery, potential stealth signatures detected. Mira's brow furrowed. Could be Coalition recon drones. Possibly, Haldiran said, voice calm but alert. Keep all defenses on high alert, I want no surprises. In the shadowed void, cloaked Coalition frigates slipped silently toward the Dauntless. Shadow Strike teams, encased in sleek assault pods, prepared for their deadly descent. Inside the flagship, Rilos transmitted a final message. This is the turning point. Fail, and the Coalition falls. The assault pods detached from their frigates, hurtling toward the Dauntless with lethal precision. Contact imminent, Mira reported as the pods closed the distance. Defensive protocols engage, Haldiran ordered. The ship's outer hull shuddered as energy pulses struck. Automated turrets flared to life, lancing bright beams at the incoming pods. But the Shadow Strike teams were not ordinary Marines. Their training was merciless, their technology state-of-the-art. Several pods breached the outer defenses, releasing stealth operatives equipped with advanced cloaking and disruption devices. Inside, the ship alarms blared. Boarding parties detected, Rilin shouted. Haldiran's fingers flew across his console. Lock down all compartments. Deploy counter-infiltration drones. The ship's corridors transformed into deadly traps. Holographic decoys, electric netting, and security turrets activated. Fierce combat erupted in the cramped passageways. Human crew and Coalition operatives clashed in shadows, a deadly game of cat and mouse. One operative, moving with lethal grace, approached the AI core chamber. His mission was clear: destroy Prometheus, but the AI anticipated the threat. Intruder detected, Prometheus intoned. Automated defense systems activated, releasing a swarm of combat drones armed with stun weaponry. The operative fired rapidly, taking down drones, but the AI's digital presence extended beyond physical defenses. Prometheus to Captain, the AI communicated. I have initiated lockdown protocols on critical systems, attempting to isolate intruders. Meanwhile, Haldiran led a squad to reinforce the core chamber. We cannot lose Prometheus, he said. It's the key to everything. The fight grew fiercer as Coalition operatives pressed their advantage, using jammers and hacking tools to disrupt ship systems. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently. An explosion rocked the engineering deck. Sabotage. Mira yelled. They've breached critical systems. Haldiran's eyes darkened. Damage control teams respond immediately. Prioritize power and life support. Back in the corridors, the battle raged on. Human crew fought desperately, buying time for repairs. Outside, Coalition frigates loomed, ready to deliver heavy fire once the Dauntless was vulnerable. Rilos watched with grim satisfaction. Soon the wolf will be trapped. But Haldiran was not defeated. Prometheus, status, he demanded. Core systems secure, Captain. External damage contained. Boarding parties neutralized or contained to non-critical areas. Good. Now prepare a counterstrike. With a sudden burst of energy, the Dauntless unleashed an electronic pulse that disabled the Coalition's nearby frigates' targeting systems. Confusion erupted outside the ship as the Coalition fleet faltered. Inside, the last boarding operatives retreated or were captured. Haldiran allowed himself a breath. We survived the shadow attack, Prometheus responded with quiet confidence. And we have learned, future infiltration attempts will be met with increased resistance. But the Coalition was not finished. The war had entered a new phase. One where shadows clashed in silence and every strike carried the weight of desperation. The Nebulan sector was a cauldron of war, the chaos unleashed by the dauntless defiance spreading like wildfire through coalition ranks. But even as the coalition scrambled to contain the human threat, unexpected hope flickered on the horizon. A new ship emerged from the distant system of Alora, sleek, fast, and unlike any vessel the coalition had ever encountered. Its hull bore the insignia of an independent faction known as the Meridian Collective, a coalition of star systems long marginalized by the dominant powers. Inside the Meridian flagship, the Resolute, Commander Lyra Vess stood tall, her gaze sharp as she reviewed. "Incoming communications," Captain, her tactical officer, reported. "The coalition fleet is stretched thin. They are vulnerable after the relay's destruction and their failed shadow strike." Lyra nodded slowly. "The humans have struck a blow, but alone they cannot shatter the coalition. It is time we join the tide." Back aboard the Dauntless, Captain Halderan monitored the new transmission from the Meridian Collective. "Unidentified vessel requests immediate communication," Prometheus announced. Halderan activated the link. The sleek image of Commander Vess appeared on the main screen. "We've been watching your fight," she said, voice steady but urgent. "The coalition's grip tightens everywhere. Alone, you risk being overwhelmed. Join us and we can turn the tide together." Halderan considered the offer. "Trust is scarce in war. Why help us?" Lyra's eyes hardened. "Because your defiance gives us hope, and hope is a weapon they fear." The alliance was forged swiftly, a pact of necessity and mutual respect. The Meridian Collective offered resources, additional ships, and vital intelligence on coalition strategies. With their combined forces, the humans and Meridian prepared for a decisive strike against the coalition's forward command base. Fort Q, Aegis, the linchpin of enemy operations in the sector. The coalition, sensing the new threat, scrambled defenses. Admiral Vesher tightened his grip on the remaining fleets, vowing to crush the alliance before it could grow. "Fort Aegis must not fall," he declared. "If it does, the entire sector will unravel." On the eve of battle, the Dauntless and the Resolute hovered in the shadow of the fort's orbital defenses. Halderan stood beside Lyra, the two captains united in resolve. "Ready your ship," Halderan said. "We strike at dawn." The battle began with a thunderous roar. Coalition turrets lit the sky, missiles streaking toward the attackers, but the combined fleet was swift and coordinated. Meridian fighters pierced gaps in the defenses, while the Dauntless executed precision strikes on weapon emplacements. Inside the chaos, Prometheus and the Meridian AI Orion worked in tandem, sharing tactical data and anticipating enemy movements. "Synchronization complete," Prometheus reported. "We exploit their defensive blind spots." Coalition forces fought fiercely to hold Fort Aegis, but confusion reigned. False signals planted by the Dauntless and the Resolute caused mistrust and disarray. Admiral Veshar cursed under his breath as his flagship came under fire. "Hold the line," he ordered, but even his voice trembled. Within the fort's core, human and Meridian boarding teams deployed swiftly, disabling critical systems and capturing command nodes. Halderan led his crew with precision and grit, each step bringing them closer to victory. The final moment came as coalition forces, overwhelmed and outmaneuvered, began to retreat. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Halderan watched the enemy falter. "This is more than a battle," he said, quietly. "It's a turning point." Lyra nodded beside him. "The reckoning tide has begun." But even in defeat, the coalition was not broken. From the shadows, new dangers awaited, old grudges, fierce rivals, and the relentless will to survive. The war was far from over. The battered remains of Fort Aegis smoldered beneath the twin suns of Nebulon. What had once been an impregnable fortress now lay crippled, its defenses shattered by the unrelenting combined assault of the Dauntless and the Meridian Collective. Inside, the ruins Captain Halderan surveyed the aftermath. His crew moved methodically through the debris, securing key command consoles and stabilizing the fort's systems. But victory, he knew, was a precarious balance. One wrong step could shatter their hard-won gains. "Status report," Halderan called to Lieutenant Mira. Command systems are back online, Mira replied, eyes scanning her console. We've begun rerouting power to support the Alliance's fleet operations. Prometheus's voice was calm, almost contemplative. Enemy reinforcements detected en route. Estimated arrival in less than 30 minutes. Haldiran frowned. They won't give up easily. Prepare for the final stand. On the horizon, the dark silhouettes of coalition dreadnoughts emerged from the starfield. Massive warships bearing the scars of recent battles but bristling with lethal intent. Admiral Veshar's flagship, still bearing its fearsome presence, led the charge. His voice echoed over the fleet's comm channels, fierce and unyielding. We will reclaim Fort Aegis and crush this rebellion once and for all. Back aboard the Dauntless, Haldiran and Commander Lyra Vess stood side by side. We've come too far to lose now, Lyra said, gripping her console. Their numbers overwhelm us, but our strategy and unity give us an edge. Haldiran nodded, voice steady. Then we fight with everything we have. The battle ignited with ferocity. Energy beams lanced through space as fleets clashed in, a deadly ballet of light and destruction. The Dauntless led the vanguard, darting through enemy fire to strike critical points on the dreadnoughts' hulls. Meridian fighters swarmed like flocks of predatory birds, harrying enemy escorts and interceptors. Prometheus and Orion wove a seamless tactical web, analyzing enemy weaknesses and directing Allied fire with ruthless efficiency. Despite the coalition's overwhelming firepower, their formations cracked under the assault. Targeted strikes disabled shield generators and weapon systems, forcing dreadnoughts to fall back in disarray. Admiral Veshar, enraged, ordered a desperate gambit, a massive energy surge to disable the Dauntless's shields. A blinding pulse washed over the Dauntless, causing systems to flicker and alarms to blare. Shields down, Mira yelled. Hull integrity compromised. Haldiran gritted his teeth. Divert all remaining power to reinstate shields. Prometheus, engage emergency protocols. In the AI core, Prometheus surged through its code, weaving layers of defense and countermeasures in fractions of a second. Emergency shield protocols activated, the AI confirmed. Systems stabilizing. As the coalition flagship closed in, its weapons primed for the killing blow, the Dauntless countered with a sudden maneuver, a sharp, calculated dive through the debris of Fort Aegis's shattered defense grid. Using the ruined structure as cover, the human ship launched a concentrated missile salvo directly at the flagship's reactor core. Explosion rocked the flagship. Fires blazed across its hull. The massive vessel shuddered, losing power and faltering. Admiral Veshar's enraged roar echoed as his ship began to drift, crippled. The coalition fleet's morale shattered like glass. Retreat orders spread quickly as Allied ships pressed their advantage, pushing the enemy back into the void. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Haldiran allowed himself a rare smile. We did it, he said quietly. Lyra's eyes sparkled with relief and resolve. This victory is just the beginning. The sector will never be the same. Prometheus's voice softened, almost proud. Human adaptability, allied strength, and calculated strategy. These forged our triumph. As the combined fleet regrouped, plans began forming, not just for defense, but for rebuilding. The Meridian Collective's offer of unity and technology promised a future where diverse star systems could stand against tyranny. But even as the stars shone a little brighter, Haldiran knew the true war was far from over. The coalition's remnants would retreat, lick their wounds, and plot their return. Yet humanity had proven something vital. A single ship, a determined crew, and an unyielding spirit could break the strongest chains.